keeping the Sabbath day holy is one of the 10 commandments. It's the 4th commandment. And it actually is the only one out of the 10 that specifically says remember, right? So it says remember the Sabbath to keep it holy, as if it's going to be the most forsaken, most forgotten one, which it is. And it's extremely important, just as the other of the 10 commandments are. But you see, like in Exodus 31, 15 through 17, God actually says keeping the Sabbath holy is the sign between me and my people, right? So if you're not keeping the Sabbath holy and you claim to be a believer, you don't have that seal, that mark, that sign between you and God that you are one of his children, that you're one of his people. And that's not a good thing, obviously. You want to have that sign of that covenant relationship between you and God, and he tells you how to do it, by keeping his covenant, the holy covenant, and the rainbow covenant, not eating unclean, and specifically in this case keeping the Sabbath day holy. But you don't see that really much at all. What you see in the churches today is a Sunday church service that is a tradition of men, all the way back in 321 AD. Constantine, as he became, in quote, Christianized for social hierarchy, he wasn't a true believer. What happened is you have Rome, all these Roman traditions, right? You have Sun God Day, you have your winter solstice celebration, you have your spring equinox, you have your Zeus statues and Roman god statues and whatnot. And so what happened is Christianity is becoming popular. Instead of getting rid of the ways of the pagans and bringing in and starting to implement what God actually said, what actually happened was, against Scripture, the ways of the heathen were blended in, which we're told never to do that in Jeremiah 10, 1 Corinthians 10, and it's in like 2 John or 3 John. There's people getting praised for not adopting any of the way of the Gentiles, of the heathens. So anyway, Rome is becoming, in quote, Christianized, and your pagan god statues are just being renamed into, oh, that's a statue of St. Peter now. Oh, that's a statue of Mary now. Your Sun God Day worship, well, we'll get rid of the Sabbath, and we will just say Sunday's the Sabbath now, right? That's the day that we're gonna call it. We're gonna keep our Sun God celebration. We're just gonna Christianize it now. Our winter solstice, we'll call that Christmas. We'll say that's the day that the Messiah was born. And our spring equinox, we'll cover that up, say that was the resurrection, and boom, there we go. It's easier for the people to just, not have to get rid of their vain traditions, but we'll just rename everything, and everything will be good and golden, right? Well, that's what happened in Rome. Contrary to Scripture, right? And so I give this example quite often, but if you have a hole in your wall, a small little hole, and you put a sticky note over that hole, and then you paint it over with the same color the wall is, then, it's going to look fine. You wouldn't be able to tell that there's a hole there. But then if you go, lean against it, put your arm up against it, or start poking around on that wall, it's going to go right through. When you get to that sticky note, it's going to go right through. The problem's still there, even though it's just been covered up. And it's the same thing in modern Christianity, is these traditions that we call Christian traditions and things that are pleasing to God are really abominable in God's eyes, and it's paganism. We rebranded it. It's witchcraft wrapped up as holiness, and it's just running rampant, right? So, but the topic of this specifically is the Sabbath, so I explain what happened there. You have Constantine saying, no Judaizing, if you keep the Sabbath, you're going to be unalived, and we're doing, Sunday is the day now of worship, right? Well, 15 years later, you have the Council of Laodicea, the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, says, and you can look this up for yourself, it's in a decree that's accessible to anybody. They say, we have the authority or power of Christ to change the Sabbath day from Saturday to Sunday. and anybody who's not abiding by that is a Judaizer. And so they said that they had the power of Christ to change the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, and that was roughly 300 years after the Messiah's death, burial, and resurrection. And you find nowhere in the Bible that ever tells you that the Sabbath changed from Saturday to Sunday. You'll have people say, well, look, in Acts it says they met on the first day of the week. Well, that doesn't mean the Sabbath is the first day of the week, right? So if I have a Bible study with the brethren on a Tuesday, does that mean that Tuesday is the Sabbath? No. So when it says that they met on the first day of the week, that's just when they met. It doesn't mean that's the Sabbath day, right? In fact, in Matthew 24 verse 20, you see the Messiah, Yeshua, saying, pray that your flight not be in the winter or on the Sabbath day, about great tribulation, a future event that hasn't happened yet. Why would he say that if the Sabbath was going to be obsolete, if it was done away with, right? When people say the Sabbath commandment's not in the New Testament, that's not true either. You see it in Luke, the end of Luke 23, verses 54 through 56. In 56, it says that they rested on the Sabbath according to the commandment, right? And then going 2 verses back, transitioning to the next point I want to make, is that the Sabbath starts at dawn. It doesn't start at evening. Right, so going back to Luke 23:54, it says, and the Sabbath drew on. Now, if you take the phrase drew on and you look at it in the Strong's Concordance, the words drew on in the Greek literally mean to begin to dawn, to begin to grow light, right? So the Sabbath is drawing on. That means the Sabbath is beginning to grow light. The Sabbath is beginning to dawn. Great example of the Sabbath starting at dawn. You can look at Exodus 16 with the timing of gathering the quails, right? They were getting the manna in the morning and the quails in the evening. And they would, get a double portion on the 6th day and have enough for the 7th day. And then on the first day, they would go back out and go gather it again. And so if the Sabbath started at evening, then they would not have been able to go gather the quails that popped up at evening and prepare them afterwards, if that makes sense, right? Because that wasn't allowed on Sabbath. You can look at, and there's tons and tons of examples, but another great one is Matthew 28:1. Right, as the Sabbath is ending and it's dawning into the first day of the week. Right, so the Sabbath is, paint that mental picture. The Sabbath is coming to a close. As the sun's coming up, it's slowly dawning into the first day of the week, and the Sabbath is ending, right? The 2 Peter 1:19 through 21 prophecy has to come true, right? The day dawning in their hearts. And just logically too, no one says, when the sun goes down, if it's Monday and the sun goes down, you don't go, oh, it's Tuesday now, right? And by the way, the midnight changeover, of course, is just a Babylonian thing too. Like, they didn't have alarm clocks back in the day to tell when it was midnight. So when does the day start? When does the rooster crow? When do you get up and begin a new day? When the sun comes up, right? That's when a day begins. Even the animals know that, right? And so in God's time, God's calendar, right? God's days, all days start when the sun comes up, including the Sabbath day. When people use, Nehemiah 13 and Leviticus 23, well, I'll just touch on Leviticus 23 real quick. That Sabbath referred to in Leviticus 23 is a high Sabbath. So you use this little logic. If Israel knew that all Sabbaths started at evening, hypothetically, why would God go out of his way to specify that this specific Sabbath needs to start at evening? Doesn't make sense, right? It's because it's singled out versus the weekly Sabbath, right? So because the weekly Sabbath always starts at morning, God makes a specific point to say this high Sabbath is going to start at evening, right? Otherwise, if there's something you normally do every day, then I don't need to specify for you to do it because you already do it every day. I would need to specify for you to do something on a certain day if you weren't already doing it every day. So think about it like that. Just recapping, the Sabbath is extremely important. You don't have the sign between you and God if you're not keeping it holy, and it does begin at dawn, and that does matter. It's important because we are children of the light, children of the day, not of darkness. And again, that 2 Peter 1 prophecy must be fulfilled, and it's all over Scripture. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? So study all these things out. Don't take my word for it, and be willing to change around your life to do God's will.